Jake Morrison looked out the window of his ship and saw the biggest space station he had ever seen in his life. Nexus Prime stretched across the darkness like a metal city floating among the stars. Lights blinked along its surface, and ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. He had been traveling for 3 months to get here, and his hands were sweating as he gripped the controls. The USS Liberty was not the biggest ship at the station, but it was home to Jake and his small crew. They had been chosen to represent all of humanity at the first meeting between Earth and the other smart races in the galaxy. Jake was just 35 years old and had spent most of his life exploring space, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His communication device made a soft beeping sound and a voice came through in perfect English. The station had somehow learned their language already. "Human vessel USS Liberty. You are cleared to dock at Bay 47. Welcome to Nexus Prime." Jake guided his ship into the docking bay and felt his heart beating fast. Through the windows, he could see other ships that looked like nothing from Earth. One looked like it was made of crystal and light. Another seemed to be growing like a plant. A third ship appeared to be made of pure energy that somehow held together in the shape of a vessel. When Jake stepped off his ship, the first thing that hit him was the smell. The air was thick with scents he could not name. Some were sweet, like flowers. Others were sharp like metal, and a few made his nose wrinkle. The gravity felt almost like Earth's, but just different enough to make him feel slightly off balance. The docking bay was filled with creatures that Jake had only seen in reports from the first contact teams. Tall beings that looked like they were made of living crystal walked past without looking at him. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbows across the metal floor. These had to be the Zephyrians that the reports mentioned. Near another ship, a group of insect-like creatures moved together in perfect formation. They had 6 arms each, and their heads looked like the front of a praying mantis, but much larger. These were the Hive Lords, and they moved like they shared one mind between all of them. When one turned its head, the others turned at exactly the same time. Jake also saw what looked like floating clouds of gas that sparkled with tiny lights. The Nebula Collective was supposed to be made of beings that had no solid form at all. They spoke by changing colors and patterns in their cloudy bodies. Jake watched one of them shift from blue to purple to green and wondered what it was trying to say. The strangest sight was a group of plant-like beings that walked on roots instead of legs. Their bodies were thick trunks covered in bark, and their arms were branches with leaves that moved on their own. The Verdani were supposed to be the oldest race in the galaxy, and Jake could believe it. They moved very slowly and seemed to think for a long time before doing anything. A tall Zephyrian approached Jake and spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Captain Morrison, I am Ambassador Veltar. Queen Zarathis has sent me to escort you to the main hall." Jake nodded and followed the crystal being through corridors that seemed to change color as they walked. The walls showed pictures of different worlds and creatures that Jake did not recognize. Some looked peaceful and beautiful. Others looked dangerous and wild. All of them looked more advanced than anything on Earth. "Tell me, Captain," Ambassador Veltar said as they walked, "what does your species hope to gain from joining the Galactic Council?" Jake thought carefully before answering. He had been told that every word he spoke here would be important. "We want to learn and to share what we know. We want to be part of something bigger than just our one world." The ambassador's crystal body flickered with different colors. How interesting. Most young species want protection or technology. They want to take. You speak of giving as well. They entered a hall so large that Jake could barely see the other end. The ceiling stretched up like the inside of a mountain and was covered with lights that looked like stars. Hundreds of different creatures filled the space, all talking in. Voices and sounds that hurt Jake's ears. At the far end of the hall, on a platform that seemed to float in the air, sat the most beautiful being Jake had ever seen. Queen Zarathis was like a sculpture made of living diamond. Light moved through her body in patterns that made Jake's eyes water if he looked too long. She was clearly the most important person in the room, and every other creature seemed to be trying to get her attention. Ambassador Veltar led Jake to a section where other humans were sitting. Jake recognized them from the reports. Dr. Linda Foster was the head scientist, Commander Alex Turner was in charge of security, and Ambassador Kate Sullivan was supposed to do most of the talking. They all looked as nervous as Jake felt. The Queen will speak soon, Ambassador Veltar said. Listen carefully to her words. They will decide whether your species has a future among the stars or will be sent back to your small world to stay forever. Jake looked around the hall again and noticed something that made his stomach feel cold. Every group of aliens was sitting, separately from the others, but they were all sitting much farther away from the humans than from each other. It was like the humans had some kind of disease that the others did not want to catch. A sound like singing filled the air, and every creature in the hall became quiet. Queen Zarathis rose from her floating platform, and her voice reached every corner of the massive space without any need for speakers. Welcome, children of the galaxy, to this gathering of minds and worlds. Today we decide the future of the newest species to reach for the stars. Today we decide the fate of humanity. Jake felt every pair of eyes, sensors, and other organs turn toward him and his fellow humans. The real test was about to begin. The second day of the summit was much worse than the first. Jake sat in a smaller meeting room with Ambassador Kate Sullivan and watched as the other species talked about humans like they were not even there. The translation devices made every word clear, and each sentence felt like a punch to the stomach. The leader of the Hive Lords, a creature called Prime Mind Zixcar, spoke in clicking sounds that turned into cold words through the translator. The humans are too dangerous to be given freedom in space. They fight wars on their own world. They destroy their environment. They cannot be trusted with advanced technology. One of the floating gas beings from the Nebula Collective pulsed with red and orange colors as it spoke. Our analysis shows that human thoughts are chaotic and unpredictable. They do not think in logical patterns. They make decisions based on emotions rather than facts. This makes them unsuitable for civilized galactic society. Even the slow-moving Verdani leader, an ancient tree being called Elder Groothall, spoke against humanity. In our long experience, young species must be guided carefully. Humans show too much aggression and too little wisdom. They should be contained to their home system until they learn to control themselves. Ambassador Sullivan tried to defend humanity, but her voice shook as she spoke. My species has learned from our mistakes. We have stopped many wars and we are working to heal our planet. We have art and music and literature that shows the beauty of human creativity. The alien leaders looked at each other in ways that made Jake feel like they had already made up their minds. Queen Zarathis watched everything from her floating throne, but said nothing. Her crystal face showed no emotion that Jake could read. Morning session ended with a proposal that made Jake's blood run cold. The Galactic Council would allow humans to join as a protected species, but they would be limited to their home solar system. No human ships would be allowed to travel beyond the edge of their own star's influence. Earth would become a zoo with humans, as the animals inside. Jake left the meeting room feeling angry and helpless. He walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The other species saw humans as violent children who needed to be locked away for everyone's safety. That evening, all the species gathered in the Great Hall for what the schedule called a cultural exchange. Each race was supposed to show the others their finest achievements in art and culture. Jake watched as group after group performed amazing displays of their abilities. The Hive Lords moved in perfect coordination, creating patterns with their bodies that told the story of their species' evolution from simple insects to masters of dozens of worlds. Every movement was precise, and every step was planned. It was beautiful, but also cold, like watching a machine that had learned to dance. Nebula Collective created a light show that filled the entire hall with colors that hurt to look at, but were impossible to look away from. They told the history of the universe by changing the colors and patterns of their gas-like bodies. It was like watching the birth and death of stars played out in fast motion. The Verdani grew a living sculpture right there on the stage. Roots came out of the floor and branches reached toward the ceiling. Flowers bloomed and died and bloomed again in cycles that showed the passing of thousands of years in just a few minutes. It smelled like a forest after rain and made Jake think of home. When it was humanity's turn, Ambassador Sullivan started to walk toward the stage with a device that would show holographic images of human art and architecture. But Jake stood up and walked past her. He had made a decision that surprised even himself. He carried nothing but a small wooden case that he had brought from Earth. Inside was his violin, the same instrument he had played since he was a child. His father had taught him to play, and his father's father before that. It was the one thing he had brought that was truly his own. Jake opened the case and took out the violin. The wood was dark with age, and the strings were old but still strong. He placed it under his chin and drew the bow across the strings. The sound that came out was nothing like the crystal singing of the Zephyrians or the electronic music that the other species had played. He played Air on the G string by Bach, a piece of music that was hundreds of years old but still moved people to tears. The melody was simple, but it carried the weight of human emotion. It spoke of sadness and hope, of loss and love, of all the things that made humans who they were. The hall became completely silent as Jake played. Even the Hive Lords stopped their constant clicking, and the Nebula Collective's colors became still. The Verdani's leaves stopped rustling, and every eye in the room focused on the human standing alone on the stage with his wooden instrument. When the last note faded away, the silence continued for what felt like forever. Jake lowered his violin and looked out at the hundreds of alien faces staring back at him. He had no idea if what he had done was good or bad, but it was real, and it was human. Queen Zarathis rose from her throne, and for the first time since Jake had seen her, her crystal body showed emotion. Colors flowed through her like water, and her voice carried a warmth that had not been there before. "Captain Morrison," she said, and her words reached every corner of the hall. "What was that? Sound you created? What do you call this magic that comes from wood and wire?" Jake felt his heart pounding as he answered. "Your Majesty, we call it music. It is how humans express feelings that we cannot put into words." The Queen stepped down from her platform and walked across the stage until she stood directly in front of Jake. Up close, she was even more beautiful and terrifying than before. Light moved through her body like liquid, and her eyes were like looking into stars. "I have lived for 3,000 of your years," she said. "I have heard the songs of 100 worlds and the music of 1,000 different species. But I have never heard anything like what you just played. It made me feel something that I do not have words for in any language." She turned to address the entire hall, and her voice became formal and ceremonial. "Captain Morrison, I extend to you an invitation that has never been given to an outsider. Tomorrow, at the closing ceremony, I invite you to join me in the traditional Zephyrian harmony dance." The reaction in the hall was immediate and shocking. The Hive Lords began clicking frantically at each other. The Nebula Collective flashed colors so fast that they looked like they were having seizures. Even the slow Verdani began moving their branches in what Jake thought might be panic. Ambassador Veltar appeared at Jake's side and whispered urgently, "Captain, you do not understand what this means. The harmony dance is sacred to our people. No outsider has ever been invited to participate. The Queen is offering you an honor that has never been given to any non-Zephyrian." Jake looked at Queen Zarathis and saw something in her crystal face that he recognized. It was curiosity, the same feeling that had driven humans to explore space and reach for the stars. "Your Majesty," Jake said with a bow, "I would be honored to dance with you." The Queen smiled, and Jake realized that everything was about to change. Jake could not sleep that night. He lay in his small room on the USS Liberty and stared at the ceiling while his mind raced with questions. What was the harmony dance, and why had Queen Zarathis invited him to participate? Ambassador Veltar had seemed shocked and maybe even scared when the invitation was given. Early in the morning, Jake heard a soft chiming sound at his door. When he opened it, he found a small Zephyrian waiting for him. This one was different from the others Jake had seen. Instead of the tall, elegant crystal beings he was used to, this one was shorter, and his crystal body had a softer glow. "Captain Morrison, I am Lir Ondos, advisor to Queen Zarathis. She has sent me to prepare you for today's ceremony." Jake invited him inside and offered him a seat, though he was not sure if Zephyrians actually sat down. Lir Ondos remained standing, but his crystal body seemed to relax. "You must understand, Captain, that what the Queen has offered you is extraordinary. The harmony dance is not just a ceremony. It is a joining of minds and souls. When two Zephyrians dance together, they share their thoughts and feelings completely. There are no secrets and no hidden emotions. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that Queen Zarathus will be able to read my mind? More than that, Lyriandos replied. She will experience your memories as if they were her own. She will feel your emotions and understand your thoughts. And you will experience hers as well, though human minds are not built for telepathic contact. The experience may be overwhelming for you. Jake thought about all the things in his mind that he would not want anyone else to see. His fears, his doubts, his memories of the wars on Earth that he had tried to forget. But he also thought about the music he had played the night before and how it had moved the Queen to extend this incredible invitation. What should I do to prepare? Jake asked. Lyrandos moved closer, and his crystal body pulsed with gentle light. Be yourself, Captain. Do not try to hide anything or pretend to be something you are not. The harmony dance reveals truth, and any attempt to deceive will only make the experience painful for both of you. The advisor spent the next few hours teaching Jake the basic movements of the dance. It was not complicated in terms of steps and movements, but Lyrandos explained that the real dance happened in the mind and spirit of the participants. When the Queen extends her hand to you, take it without fear. When she begins to sing, let your mind open to hers. Do not fight the connection or try to control it. Let it happen naturally. As the time for the ceremony approached, Jake felt more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. He put on his best uniform and checked his appearance in the mirror. He looked like just a regular human being, nothing special or remarkable. He wondered what Queen Zarathus would think when she saw inside his ordinary human mind. The closing ceremony was held in the same great hall where Jake had played his violin the night before, but now the space had been transformed. Crystal formations had grown from the floor and walls, creating a pattern that reminded Jake of a flower, or maybe a star. Light moved through the crystals in waves that seemed to follow some rhythm that Jake could not quite hear. All the species were present again, but this time they seemed tense and worried. The Hive Lords stayed in tight groups, and their clicking was fast and agitated. The Nebula Collective flashed with colors that Jake had learned meant confusion and concern. Even the usually calm Verdani seemed restless, their leaves rustling, with nervous energy. Queen Zarathus appeared at the center of the crystal formation, wearing what Jake assumed was ceremonial dress, though it was hard to tell with her crystal body. Light moved through her in patterns more complex and beautiful than anything Jake had seen before. When she moved, it was like watching liquid starlight flow across the stage. She extended her hand toward Jake, and her voice filled the hall. Captain Morrison, will you join me in the dance that connects all living beings? Jake walked forward and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, he felt a shock like electricity, but warm instead of painful. The Queen's hand felt like smooth glass that was somehow alive and warm. The music began, but it was not like any music Jake had ever heard. It seemed to come from the crystals themselves, and from the Queen's body, and maybe from Jake's own heartbeat. The sound filled his mind and made him feel like he was floating. They began to move together, and Jake found that he knew the steps without being taught. His body moved in harmony with the Queen's as if they were connected by invisible strings. Around them, the crystal formations began to glow brighter, and the light patterns became more complex. Then something happened that Jake had not expected. Instead of the Queen reading his mind, Jake found himself experiencing her thoughts and memories. He saw the history of the Zephyrian people through her eyes. He felt the weight of ruling over billions of beings, and the loneliness of being the only one of her kind who could make the hard decisions. But he also felt her curiosity about humanity, and her growing belief that the other species were wrong about them. She had been watching Jake since he arrived, and had seen something in him that the others had missed. At the same time, Jake realized that Queen Zarathus was experiencing his memories. She saw his childhood on Earth, his training as a pilot, his dreams of exploring space and meeting other intelligent life. She felt his love for his family and his fear of failing to represent humanity properly. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of Jake's mind being overwhelmed by the Queen's telepathic abilities, his human thoughts began to affect her in ways that neither of them had anticipated. Human emotions were different from Zephyrian emotions. Where the Queen's people felt things in neat, organized patterns, human feelings were messy and complicated and contradictory. Jake could feel sad and happy at the same time, could love someone and be angry with them, could be afraid of something and excited about it, all at once. The Queen had never experienced anything like this before. Her crystal body began to pulse with new colors that had no names in the Zephyrian language. The harmony of the dance became something entirely new as Jake's chaotic human thoughts mixed with her ordered Zephyrian mind. Around them, the watching aliens began to realize that something unprecedented was happening. The crystal formations were glowing with colors that had never been seen before. The music was changing, becoming more complex and beautiful as it incorporated both the Queen's harmony and Jake's emotional chaos. The Hive Lords stopped their clicking entirely and stared in silence. The Nebula Collective's colors became completely still as they tried to understand what they were seeing. The Verdani's leaves hung motionless as they watched the impossible dance unfold. Jake felt the Queen's surprise and wonder as she experienced human creativity for the first time. She saw through his memories how humans created art and music and stories, not in spite of their chaotic emotions, but because of them. The pain and joy and confusion of human life was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The dance reached its climax as both Jake and Queen Zarathis fully opened their minds to each other. In that moment, every being in the hall could see the light patterns that were being created by their joined consciousness. It was like watching the birth of a new kind of star. When the music finally ended, Jake and the Queen stood together in the center of the crystal formation, still holding hands. The light in her crystal body had changed permanently, and Jake could see new patterns moving through her that had not been there before. Queen Zarathis looked out at the assembled representatives of the galactic races, and her voice carried a power that made everyone listen. "I have seen inside the mind of humanity," she announced. "I have felt their thoughts and experienced their emotions. The chaos that we feared is not a weakness, but a gift. The unpredictability that we sought to control is the source of their greatest strength." She turned to Jake and smiled with an expression that was both alien and completely human at the same time. "Captain Morrison, your species has shown me something that my people lost long ago. You have reminded me what it means to truly feel." The Queen faced the other alien leaders, and her voice became formal and commanding. "I withdraw my support for the proposal to limit humanity to their home system. Instead, I propose that we welcome them as full members of the Galactic Council and learn from the gifts they bring to our civilization." The hall erupted in sounds of shock and protest from the other species, but Jake barely heard them. He was still feeling the after effects of the mind link with the Queen and trying to understand what had just happened. Everything had changed, just as the Queen had said. The dance that was supposed to be a simple ceremony had become the moment when humanity's future among the stars was decided. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was called before Jake even had time to understand what had happened during the dance. Prime Mind Zixcar of the Hive Lords was clicking so fast that the translation device could barely keep up with his words. "This is unacceptable," he declared. "Queen Zarathis has been compromised by exposure to human chaos. Her judgment can no longer be trusted. The Council must override her decision and proceed with the containment protocol." The Nebula Collective representative pulsed with angry red colors as it spoke. "Our analysis of the mind link shows dangerous contamination patterns. The human consciousness has introduced variables that threaten the stability of galactic civilization. This infection could spread to other telepathic species." Jake sat in the council chamber, feeling like he was watching his species' death sentence being written. Ambassador Sullivan and the other human representatives looked as shocked and helpless as he felt. They had come to the summit hoping to join galactic civilization, not to destroy it. Queen Zarathis entered the chamber, and Jake immediately noticed the change in her. The light patterns in her crystal body were different now, more complex and somehow more alive. When she moved, it was with a grace that had not been there before. The other council members noticed it too, and Jake could see fear in their alien faces. "Honored council members," the Queen began, "I understand your concerns, but I must tell you that what happened during the Harmony Dance was not contamination. It was revelation." Elder Groothall of the Verdani spoke in his slow, ancient voice. "Queen Zarathis, in our long experience, young species often appear more attractive than they truly are. The humans may seem creative and emotional now, but history shows that chaos leads to destruction. They will bring war and disorder to our peaceful galaxy. The Queen moved to the center of the chamber, and her voice carried a sadness that Jake had not heard before. You speak of peace and order, but what we have built is not peace. It is stagnation. We have created a galaxy where no new ideas can grow and no new beauty can be born. She gestured toward a wall display that showed images of the different alien civilizations. Look at our art, our music, our literature. When was the last time any of us created something truly new? When was the last time any of us felt genuine? Surprise or wonder? Prime Mind Zixkar's mandibles clicked with irritation. Order and predictability are the foundations of civilization. Chaos and unpredictability lead to suffering and war. The humans must be controlled before they corrupt others with their dangerous ideas. Queen Zarathis touched a control panel, and the wall display changed to show new images. These were ancient Zephyrian artifacts that Jake had never seen before. The art was wild and passionate, full of the same kind of emotional chaos that Jake had felt in his own mind. This is what my people created 10,000 years ago, the Queen said, before we learned to suppress our chaotic thoughts in favor of harmony. Before we decided that order was more important than creativity. The images showed sculptures that seemed to dance with life, paintings that burst with colors Jake could barely look at, and musical notations that looked more like abstract art than sheet music. It was beautiful and strange, and completely different from the elegant but cold crystal art that modern Zephyrians created. We were not always the controlled beings you see today, Queen Zarathis continued. Once, we felt emotions as strongly as humans do. Once we created art that moved people to tears and music that could change the way someone saw the universe. She turned to face the other council members directly. But we were afraid of our own chaos, just as you are afraid of human chaos now. We decided to breed it out of ourselves, to create a society where everyone thought the same thoughts and felt the same controlled emotions. Jake realized that he was seeing something that the other species had been hiding from themselves for thousands of years. They had not evolved beyond chaos and emotion. They had chosen to cut those parts of themselves away, thinking they were becoming more civilized. The Nebula Collective representative flashed colors that the translator interpreted as confusion and distress. The chaos factor creates instability. In our thought networks, it makes logical decision-making impossible. How can a civilization function when individuals think different thoughts and feel different emotions? The same way it functioned for millions of years before we decided to standardize it, Queen Zarathis replied. The same way the humans have built a civilization despite their emotional chaos, perhaps even because of it. She brought up new images on the display, these ones showing human achievements. Jake saw pictures of Earth's greatest art and architecture, recordings of human music from classical to jazz to rock, and excerpts from literature that had moved billions of people to feel new emotions. Look at what they have accomplished in just a few thousand years, the Queen said. They have gone from primitive tool users to space travelers. They have created beauty that speaks to hearts across species barriers. They have turned their chaos into a strength, rather than trying to eliminate it. Elder Groothal's branches rustled with what Jake was beginning to recognize as anxiety. But at what cost? Their world is scarred by wars. Their environment is damaged. They have suffered because they could not control their destructive impulses. Jake found himself standing up before he realized he was going to speak. "You're right," he said, and his voice seemed too loud in the formal chamber. "We have made terrible mistakes. We have fought wars and damaged our world and hurt each other in ways that we regret every day." The alien representatives looked at him with expressions that might have been satisfaction if he could read their faces correctly. But Jake was not finished speaking. "But we learned from those mistakes," he continued. "We found ways to turn our anger into determination to do better. We used our sadness about the damage we caused to motivate ourselves to heal our world. We took the chaos that could have destroyed us and found ways to make it creative instead of destructive." Queen Zarathis nodded and her crystal body glowed brighter. "This is what I experienced during our mind link. The human capacity to feel pain and still choose hope. The ability to make mistakes and still believe in the possibility of redemption. She faced the council again, and her voice became firm and commanding. The question before us is not whether humans are perfect. They are not, and they do not claim to be. The question is whether our galaxy has become so afraid of imperfection that we have forgotten how to grow. Prime Mind. Zixkar's clicking became almost violent in its intensity. If we allow human chaos to spread, it will destroy the order we have spent millions of years building. Individual thoughts will replace collective wisdom. Emotional decisions will replace logical planning. Our civilization will collapse into the same kind of primitive warfare that humans practice. Or, Queen Zarathus said quietly, individual creativity will enrich collective wisdom. Emotional inspiration will improve logical planning. Our civilization will remember how to dream again. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Jake looked around at the alien faces and realized that they were not just deciding humanity's fate. They were deciding whether to cling to the safe, sterile civilization they had built or to risk everything for the chance to remember what they had lost. The Nebula Collective representative spoke in colors that pulsed with uncertainty. If we accept the humans as full members, there will be consequences. Other species may begin to question the established order. The stability we have maintained for millennia could be threatened. Yes, Queen Zarathus agreed. It could be. The question is whether that stability is worth preserving if it means never growing, never changing, never becoming more than we are today. Elder Groot Hal's ancient voice carried a weight of sadness that Jake could feel in his bones. In our long existence, we have seen what happens when species embrace chaos over order. We have seen worlds burn and civilizations fall. Are you truly willing to risk that for the sake of human creativity? Queen Zarathus looked at Jake, and he saw, in her crystal features, the same expression he had seen on human faces when someone was about to make a decision that would change everything. I am, she said, because I have seen what happens when species choose order over growth. We become living museums, preserving the past instead of creating the future. We become so afraid of making mistakes that we stop trying to do anything meaningful at all. The council chamber erupted in sounds of protest and alarm from all the alien representatives. But through the chaos, Jake heard Queen Zarathus speak one more time. The vote will be tomorrow. Each species will decide whether to welcome humanity as equals or to maintain the status quo. But know this. Whatever the council decides, the Zephyrian Dominion will stand with Earth. We choose growth over safety, hope over fear. As Jake left the chamber, he realized that the dance had done more than change his life. It had started a revolution that would either destroy galactic civilization or transform it into something better than it had ever been before. Jake did not sleep at all the night before the vote. He walked the corridors of Nexus Prime and watched as groups of aliens gathered in corners, speaking in hushed tones about the decision that would reshape the galaxy. Some looked angry, others seemed frightened, and a few appeared excited by the possibility of change. Near the docking bays, Jake encountered something he had not expected. A young Hive Lord was standing alone, away from the collective groups that his species usually formed. When Jake approached, the insect-like being turned toward him with what might have been curiosity. "Human Captain," the Hive Lord said in clicking sounds that the translator turned into words. "I am designated Worker Unit Clickstar. I have been listening to the recordings of your music from the cultural exchange." Jake was surprised. He had not known that the other species were paying attention to his violin performance. "What did you think of it?" The young Hive Lord's mandibles moved in what Jake was beginning to recognize as nervous behavior. "It created responses in my neural pathways that are not supposed to exist. Individual thoughts that were not shared by the collective consciousness. The Prime Mind would consider this malfunction, but I found it interesting." Jake realized that the chaos of human emotion was already beginning to affect other species, just as the council members had feared. But instead of destruction, it seemed to be awakening something that had been sleeping. "What kind of thoughts?" Jake asked gently. "I wondered what it would be like to create something that was mine alone. Not shared with the hive, not part of the collective decision-making process. Something that came from my own mind and expressed my own feelings." Clickstar's clicks became faster and more excited. Is this what you call individuality? Before Jake could answer, they were interrupted by the appearance of Prime Mind Zixcar and a group of senior Hive Lords. The collective leader's clicks were sharp and angry as he addressed the young worker. Clixitar, you will return to the collective immediately. Individual thoughts are a malfunction that must be corrected before it spreads to other units. But Clixitar did not move toward the